Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Live. This is one of these shows where we're talking to political candidates about the upcoming election and their race. And my good friend Scott Hilton is a candidate for Georgia House 48. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Rico, great to be here. Always good to see you. Thank you.
Same here. Glad to have you on. In the meantime, before we get into that interview, a couple of things. I just want to tell everyone that about our corporate sponsor for these shows and for our publications is EV Remodeling. Eli is a great guy. He lives here in Peachtree Corners, does a great job. You should visit him. He does a lot of remodeling, design to build type work. Just been a fantastic person to deal with. So check out Eli's website, evremodeling.com. Actually, evremodelinginc.com, and that'll take you to his showcase page, and you can check out what he's done. So before we even get into any of the questions for Scott, I'm going to pull out some of our lower thirds here, and I'm going to bring on the map so then people can understand where this district, this is a new House District 48, first time being run in. It encompasses Peachtree Corners and that lower portion, as you can see, and Johns Creek, Alpharetta, and Roswell. Very, very big difference on some of the districts that are out there. Certainly, this is a district that people have to get used to, may not even understand where they live and if they're going to be who they're going to be represented by eventually. But the incumbent, if you will, of this newly formed district, which is different from what the incumbent originally had anyway. So I don't even know how that works, but because it's so different from what it was before. The incumbent right now is a Democrat by the name of Mary Robichaud, who's only was elected, I believe, in 2019, if I'm correct on that.
2018. Yep, that's correct.
Right. So you're running as a Republican candidate. You won your primary. You had over 6,000 voters come in. I think it was 6,400 votes come in. Granted, it was a contested Republican race for some higher level statewide races there. So you know, Republicans had more votes coming out. And like you said earlier, before we got on, probably even some cross voting maybe coming onto that. Whereas the Democratic primary, very little voting going on there. I think the incumbent that you're facing had only about 3,300 votes in that primary. Um, but she had no opponent, I think, in that race either. So that's just to give a shape to where we are. And now I'd like to discuss a little bit, let some people actually know who you are, Scott. Give some background about where you've come from, what offices you've held, and what you've been doing the last couple of years.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that's great setup, Rico. Always good to see you and talk to you. Love what you do for Peachtree Corners. I know I read the Peachtree Corners magazine all the time, and there's always
Thank
good
you.
info found in there. So
Thanks.
for me and our family, we've been in the Peachtree Corners area and in this district a little over 10 years now. We moved here in 2011 and absolutely love it. And immediately was embraced by the community and got involved in public service almost right away. Joining the United Peachtree Corners Civic Association, my HOA board, ultimately serving on a number of organizations in Gwinnett, including our local Fowler YMCA. And
Right.
when you raise your hand enough times, people say, "Hey, have you ever thought about maybe running for public office?" And the right doors opened at the right time, and I was able to run for what used to be House District 95, and was fortunate enough to win in 2016. And served in the state house for 2 years and got a lot of good things done on behalf of families in the areas of education, special needs, public safety, and was really proud of the work that we were able to get done. Unfortunately, 2018 was a challenging year for a lot of Republicans across the Atlanta metro area, and we found ourselves on the losing end. And for me, like I said earlier, public service has just always been in the blood. And so at that time, Governor Kemp reached out and said, "Scott, I'm creating a small business commission to look at cutting red tape and streamlining government for the benefit of small business. Would you lead that initiative for me?" And anytime the governor calls, you say, "Yes, sir." And so headed that initiative up for him for the last 2 years. We've got a lot of great stuff done in terms of streamlining government, reducing regulation, and really toward the tail end of our service, becoming a small business triage unit during COVID and helping small businesses with the resources they need to survive and thrive and get past COVID. And I applaud the governor and his leadership in keeping our state open and keeping our economy strong during that very difficult period. I then finished my work there and went back into the private sector where I'm a banker by trade. I'm a commercial banker now with South State Bank. My office is right here off of Spalding in Peachtree Corners. So we now truly do live, work, and play in Peachtree Corners. My family is here, and opportunity opened up to run for the House seat again. And we're excited about it. Had a ton of friends and family say, hey, why don't you go ahead and jump on in, give another shot at it. Senator Isaacson, the late, great Johnny Isaacson used to say, the only thing that can get politics out of your blood is the formaldehyde when you're gone. And it's so true. I found the same with me. Just love the opportunity to help others out. And this truly does feel like a calling.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've ever met a politician, like you said, that doesn't come back in or anything. I mean, you have to die in this, essentially, pretty much. It doesn't leave. You answered one of my questions about why did you decide to run again, and that's good. It is. You've lived here for quite a while. I've seen you at Light Up the Corners, Glow Run, and I've seen you at other events. Of course, you've been on the YMCA board, so you've been involved in the community quite a bit, and you've done, I believe, a decent job out there. Of course, being a Republican, there are competing issues, right? People believe in certain things, and some of them will hold true to those issues that they believe in. But overall, I believe that you've probably done a decent job out there when you were in office. But
yeah, I think, Rico, one of the things I'm most proud about is even though we ended up losing in 2018, as we kind of broke down the data around what happened, it was amazing to me to see 1,000 people checked the Stacey Abrams box and then went over and voted for me on the Republican side. And I think it just kind of speaks volumes to people really picking person over party. And that's kind of our message this time around as well, is, you can really trust me to listen to you. We may not always agree on issues, but I'm going to be open, accessible, and like I said, really listen to you. And people admire that, and they want that. They want more of a uniter in politics than a divider. And that's what I aim to be. And again, my goal this time is to, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or somewhere in between, I'd love to be your candidate.
It's interesting. Politics is local. I mean, as you go up that ladder towards the Senate race and then the national races, things do get picked apart, and probably even more so now. I mean, if we look at what the New York Times just put out a few days ago about Democrats fretting over the race between Abrams and Kemp, that there's not enough enthusiasm there right now, and that they're actually afraid of what you're saying, that people will jump that ballot and vote for Kemp and then come back and vote for Democrats on other races or Republicans. More splitting of the ballot than ever before, maybe even in the state of Georgia for this type of race, at least from that top down.
I think Georgia's really unique in that standpoint. They talk about how we're a purple state, but we're really a state that votes for good people. You saw Kemp in the primary get 70%. That was huge, and I think as I talk to voters, a lot of them are looking at his record, and maybe in 2018 they said, I'm not sure, but they've seen what he's done and how he's managed. And I think that's why Stacey's having a tough time is it's hard to argue against the record he has in terms of keeping our state strong, safe, and on the right track. So Republicans got a good message this time around. Yeah.
And I think he's avoiding the Trump trap, if you will, also. Trump's not my favorite person, to say the least. So I don't have a problem saying that out loud. But I don't think he's fallen into that trap, really. He's his own man, it seems, at least. So whether I agree with some of his issues or not is a different story. But for the most part, I believe he's done some good things. And he's planning to do some more, it sounds like. Our biggest issue right now, aside from some of the social issues, which we could get into debates over abortion, for example, and stuff. That's a very emotional type of debate, I believe. So that's a debate I'd rather leave off this particular talk, because it's just a very emotional type of thing. I think it deals with beliefs when life starts. We can agree to disagree about certain things. So let's leave that aside for a minute, even though that's an important issue. And then you can state where you stand on it. But I really want to talk about the problem with inflation right now and the problem with the economy right now. So you have, originally there was high gas that's coming down. Now, I don't know if that's coming down for any good reason or if that's going to go back up as we get into the fall again. Um, but we have 40-year high inflation in the state of Georgia. I mean, I know when I go shopping at Ingles or Publix, the prices is like, where are these prices coming from? Uh, Food's a lot more expensive than it used to be. Um, there's just things hitting the pocketbooks with people, and even businesses not able to hire. Even with that, not able to hire enough people, whereas before they would never advertise the per hour job rate, let's say. Now I see it plastered on windows, $15 an hour start. That would never have been put up there, and every business person I talk to, I mean, there's a restaurant, fairly big restaurant that's supposed to open on Peachtree Parkway that's not opening yet because they're afraid to open right now because there's not enough workers to staff the restaurant. Okay. So there's stuff like that. So tell us, what do you think can be done? I mean, what can be done on a state level? That's where you would be. So what can be done on a state level to combat that inflation
That's
and
a
the
great
problems
question.
business?
Yeah, and Georgians unfortunately are really suffering the consequences of, we really overreacted. Washington D.C. overreacted in terms of when Biden was sworn in and passed a number of spending bills that really, if you look at the U.S. money supply, there is so much money out there that is just driving inflation to all new highs, and we're unfortunately going to be suffering the consequences of that for at least the next year or so. And I know our families face it. Every time we go to the grocery store, it feels like we're paying double what we were before. And so, what does that look like at a state level, and how do we address that? So, right now, because of all this spending, Georgia is actually, since we've done so well and budgeted so conservatively and done a fantastic job, we're sitting on a lot of excess cash at a state level above and beyond what we need in our rainy day reserve. So, the state keeps a rainy day reserve in case we have another COVID or economic shutdown, but we have a few $1 billion above and beyond what we need to keep. And so the decision point for voters is, do we elect someone like Scott who's going to look at those resources, allocate them responsibly, even return a lot of them back to the taxpayer to help them combat inflation? And so that's one of my campaign promises is listen, Georgians need more dollars in their pocket to kind of help combat some of this, the doubling of gas and grocery costs, et cetera. As opposed to kind of further expanding the size and scope of government. Number two, a lot of the pain has come through supply chain issues. And, we really need to focus in on, we've got a great airport, a great port in Savannah. Let's continue to invest in those assets so that we can avoid ever having to go through those supply chain disruptions again. And then thirdly, workforce development. I hear the same thing that you do from all business owners, that I just can't find people. And if I do, I got to pay them outrageous rates. And so we've got to strengthen and largen our workforce. And so that comes down to education. That comes with re-equipping workers who maybe were in one industry and want to switch to another. And so I'm the candidate that, has proven that I can get stuff done. And we'll get down there and do that again to kind of lessen the burden of policies that we're facing from DC that are having real world impacts on some of the families right now. I mean, it's easily the number one issue that I hear at doors is, Scott, we got to do something about inflation.
Right. So talking about inflation, talking about what a state can do and stuff, I just got my property tax bill. I can't even it's just like, they can say they're not raising the millage rate, and they are right. But when they assess the property that much higher and essentially have increased my tax just by valuation, never mind by raising the millage rate, it's ridiculous. So now I understand there may be some support for Governor Kemp's $500 property tax rebate for 2023. That's something he's proposing. Obviously, he's not we don't know if he's going to be governor next year. The assumption is he may be, he may not be. Is this something, I don't even know if this is something that Democrats would actually support. Um, you would think that they would, but I don't know. Is this something you support? Do you see this as a value thing? Do you see this as a reasonable thing for property owners, residential, I'm assuming, versus commercial?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, so Governor Kemp has proposed this property tax relief, which I think is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, all of us, we're not selling our houses, so we're not realizing the equity that we have, but the tax bill just goes up on the value. A lot of that, again, is driven by inflation. And
Right.
so I fully support Governor Kemp's property tax relief. It's something that's impacted, again, our family with so many others across the district that I hear about. And so I think that is a difference. Again, as sort of you evaluate the two parties this November. I know, my opponent has voted against some budget items that would have provided that kind of relief to families. And so, as voters evaluate who they support at the polls, again, rather than kind of grow the size and scope of government, I want to return your tax dollars back to you in the form of relief on your property taxes. And so I think it's just a prudent thing to do. Government is not in the business of making a profit. And so if we can help everyday folks out all across the spectrum, I think it makes absolute sense.
All right, cool. And my other 2 cents is I would love to see a cap on these things too. There's no reason just because evaluations have gone as high as they are that these assessed values are that much higher. It's like, I think some of them were like 20% increase. It's just crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if
Yeah.
you're retired. If you're a retired person, which I'm not, but a retired person having to deal with that, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Um, Residents move into Peachtree Corners because of our excellent schools. There are a lot of people coming to Peachtree Corners. There are on my phone is either phone calls or text messages or emails or letters of people just saying, "Are you ready to sell your house? We got a cash offer for you." I'm just getting a little too tired of that. But apparently, there's not enough housing in Peachtree Corners. So I don't know what is going on, and how do we address some of these housing issues, and make sure that our schools remain good quality schools.
Oh, yeah.
Either through funding or programs. So tell us a little bit where you are with that.
It's a great problem to have. Like you said, I know personally we moved to Peachtree Corners because of the great schools. And
Mm.
so a lot of, good education, that's what drives businesses moving here, people moving here. We've got to keep them strong. And so that's, when you ask me kind of what my platform is, it's number one, economy, we got to get that fixed. Education, got to keep our schools strong. And then public safety, you have to keep our area safe. But yeah, in terms of education, we've had some difficult past couple of years, right? So with masking of students, keeping folks at home, it's been challenging. And a lot of our students are behind, and we've got to figure out a way to get them caught up. We've got to figure out a way, too, to give parents more power in the decision making in regards to their kids' curriculum, how, the requirements in terms of how they go to school, what the school's requirements are there. We got to keep our schools safe. I know the governor has invested millions and millions of dollars in keeping our schools safe. But we also have to empower our teachers as well. So many of them have to teach to the test, and there's so much bureaucracy. We've got to remove a lot of that red tape and let teachers get back to what they do best, which is teaching. I previously served when I was in the House, and the last time I was on the Education Committee and was the leader in passing a charter school bill to increase the number of charter schools that we had in Georgia, giving parents more flexibility and choice in their child's education. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all model. Every kid is different. Every family is different. And we've got to make those options available to them.
What would you do for public school wise also, specifically as far as program improvements or other things within the public school system even? Are there any specifics that you would recommend?
Well, I support what the governor's done, and I think there's still more room to do in terms of teacher pay. One of the big things he did is he did a dollar raise rather than a percentage raise, and what that did is that rewarded some of our newer teachers. We need to really focus on the pipeline of younger teachers coming in. I think we've lost a lot of that, and there's been a lot of turnover, and we're losing some of the best and brightest talent that we have in the state. So I would focus on how do we attract newer kids into that and their teachers into that K through 12 environment. But then I also want to focus on higher education as well. That's not a one, that shouldn't be a one size fits model too. We've seen a lot of, kids go off and get a 4-year degree expecting a job of some type after that, and it just doesn't happen. And so we've been kind of trained that, you've got to go through that. Well, that model doesn't fit everybody. We have tons of technical colleges, schools in Georgia that I want to promote some more that teach you real life skills that you can take to either start your own business or have a real life skill that you can add. And so that's part of that workforce development that I mentioned earlier that'll really help companies who are looking for good talent, but it's just not out there. And we've got to bring more of that talent to our state through higher education.
I think that's a great idea. I think my youngest son went through Paul Duke STEM. I took a tour through there. We did a couple of articles in the magazine about the school, about their 3D printing, about the certification within the school system, where these kids essentially can graduate and actually go get a job because they've been trained in CAD software and 3D printing, and they can actually go out and get a job. He got into that school for the first year, and then COVID hit. So interestingly enough, they were digital. They had digital Fridays and all. So school 4 days a week with the digital Friday. And for the last 2 years, senior and sophomore and senior year, he was essentially out of the school. He was learning from home. And then his senior year, he was actually on the GSU's Dunwoody campus for all his courses. So he was like 38% through, ready. He just started Kennesaw, but he's 38% through his degree practically.
Wow.
I mean, that's the benefit of hope. That's the benefit of some of these schools and digital learning. But like you said before, it doesn't always help everyone. Younger kids, their reading level is shot, some of these kids.
Yeah, and it really pains me. We had these digital learning days, and we still have them in Gwinnett, and it frustrates me to no end because I don't know about other parents, but it is really difficult with younger students to have them sit in front of a computer all day and try to learn. And there's some families where both parents are working, and it's just not possible, and it doesn't work. And so kids need to be in school learning. And again, another way to kind of differentiate between me and my opponent. I mean, that's kind of my core belief is that, we need less of, behind a computer. Not everyone has access to a laptop or internet. And
would you believe in more hybrid, the willingness to adapt? Like you said, there's choice you want to give, right? Charter school is a choice. So why not choice in the public school system? Whether you want to have a hybrid learning where it's 3-4 days a week in class, a day or two digital. If the parents would like that, some kids work better that way. It's an odd thing, right? And some kids work better being in a class in front of a teacher. It's just the nature of the beast. Everyone learns things different, right? Some people learn better with videos. Some people learn better from reading a textbook.
One of Georgia's largest high schools and one of the largest charter schools in the state is the Cyber Academy. It's all online, and that was even pre-COVID. It was all online, and so for some students who a classroom doesn't work, they prefer online. That's awesome. We need to have those. Essentially, we need to have every channel available for every student because, like I said, not every student is a widget. They're all different and special in their own way, and we ought to be able to accommodate that.
Cool. Now, we were talking a little bit, you mentioned safety before. Of course, the Uvalde, everyone knows that, I think, now. And it's sad, the things that they went through. Over 100 officers there, and yet for an hour, those kids, just unbelievable. I just don't know what was running through anyone's mind at that point. Now, we in Peachtree Corners, I mean, these things can happen anywhere. And to say, because it only takes that one time, right? We're fortunate in the city of Peachtree Corners to be able to have certain things going, right? There was that shooting at the QT that was essentially solved to some degree and quickly because of cameras, because of a crime center in the cloud type of operation, because things were able to be found here and in Atlanta through these technical online and in the cloud searches, right? There's a lot of that going on. We don't have our own police force, the city of Peachtree Corners. We have Gwinnett police that we hire to do our work. Where do you see safety on as far as what you believe should be brought back into a city like Peachtree Corners? Um,
Oh, it's
there's a lot out there, right?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, you mentioned that QT shooting. I think that was a wake up call for a lot of us. It's certainly been an issue in Atlanta, and the problem is it's starting to impact our area. Certainly, Buckhead has been struggling with it, and it's kind of creeping up our way. And so, yeah, we have a lot of district attorneys and prosecutors, Democrat prosecutors down in Atlanta who are not enforcing a lot of this stuff, and folks are getting back out on the street. And yeah, the QT thing was scary because it was folks that managed to steal a car down in Atlanta, drive up here, and uh, you know,
Yeah.
an incredible young man lost his life because of it, and it's horrible and it's a tragedy. And so, we moved to Peachtree Corners for a reason, for the good schools, the business, and public safety. And so, yeah, we've got to elect folks who care about that. We don't need to become a police state, obviously, but we need to be diligent about enforcing our laws. And again, another differentiator between me and the opponent is I'm going to vote in favor of a lot of laws that restrict the street racing and some of that stuff that's plagued the suburbs. Folks stealing packages off your porch and all that.
Yes.
Just some of the nonsense that's out there. While my opposition may have voted against that, I'm going to be in favor of that because I think, having a strong community is the underpinning of a lot of things. And so, I think that's incredibly, incredibly important. And it's on a lot of folks' minds. I mean, it's just we're seeing this boiling of the pot of more and more activity. And if you put up with it, it's kind of the broken window syndrome. And that's what
Right.
you see in Atlanta now. I mean, it's pretty eye-opening to me every time I go down there. I see office vacancies and businesses starting to move out. And our capital city in the state cannot go that way. I mean, we were the home of the Olympics. We've got to keep Atlanta strong, prosperous, and so that'll be part of our job.
I'm curious what you think as as an individual, as a citizen about remote work, about what I'm seeing right now is that a lot of these businesses, not necessarily here in Georgia, although some of them too, are really wanting people to come back to the office full time. No remote work. Um, the sad to say part is that the employee has become more powerful, if you will, than the employer over the last few years, which is a good thing.
Yep.
Um, I think that's a good thing. And now, because inflation, because of unemployment may end up rising now because of what's going on with the Fed Reserve and the raising of the rates, the employee may be losing some of that leverage they have to a degree. I mean, do you think people should be going back to work? Like, do you believe remote work is okay or a hybrid of that? How would you solve that employee issue that these companies are facing without removing the freedom that some of these people have?
It's a great question. From a state perspective, I don't think the government ought to be dictating, what private entities do with their employees. I think it should be up to the companies and their shareholders and employees. I will say how it impacts us at a state level is when we think about transportation. That's one of our biggest items we spend on in our $30 billion budget. And I know Peachtree Corners, and Gwinnett at large has had a number of votes on MARTA and other things over the
Mm.
years. And if COVID taught us anything, is that we need to be really innovative and rethink how people move around. And you're right, Rico. Now you can work from your home. You can go into the office for a couple hours. It's really kind of changed what transportation looks like in Georgia. And so we've got to be forward thinking about that and how people are going to be moving around in the future. But you're right. There's going to be some pretty real world consequences in terms of folks losing jobs over the next 12 to 18 months. And
Yeah.
that's going to impact a lot of people. And again, going back to that retraining and educating and equipping folks with new skills to allow them to get immediately back into the workforce is huge. But yeah, in terms of government mandates and stuff, I err on the side of, I think businesses and their employees know best what the best setup is for them. I know personally, with 3 kids at home, I enjoyed going back to the office and having a little bit of quiet and stability
Okay.
in our office. But that was the decision that we made. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, everyone has. I mean, I've been working from home for a while. So and it's a great opportunity for when my kids were in. For the most part, I have three, so one of them is still here. The other one's up in school, and the other one lives on his own with his girlfriend. But having them down for lunch or breakfast, and it's all good to a degree, right?
Well, I think one of the
Um,
things that at a state level also we've been talking about, and I think that what the Georgia House and the governor have done a real good job on is rural broadband. So right here in Georgia or in Atlanta and Peachtree Corners,
mhm.
we've got just about all the internet we need. But there were some sad stories about folks, out in rural parts of our state when it went all digital, having to drive to their local Wendy's and piggyback off their Wi-Fi
Right.
in order to go to school, and
Yeah.
so we've got to figure out, and we've got the dollars to do it now to get internet to parts of the state where, especially school-age children really need it.
Aren't the federal dollars, didn't that come in through federal dollars to the state so then they can allocate it where it needs to go?
Yep, that's exactly right. So Georgia, the governor's office, Office of Planning and Budget, is doing that grant process right now to get those dollars in the hands of folks who can build kind of that last mile connectivity. Internet now is really kind of the new highway, and
Yeah.
you've got to build out these fiber optics to homes that before we weren't able to reach.
What do you think about, we're at sort of tail end of the interview, but I'd like to hit on a few different issues that we weren't really thinking about, but things that come to my mind. What do you think about the autonomous vehicle stuff that we're doing here in Peachtree Corners? Do you think the state should get more involved in creating a smart state? I mean, we have a smart city here. I mean, how much, and we've had the smart city, I think it was the Smart Expo. That was a World Expo that came here I think it was last year. What do you think about that? Getting more businesses that are that type of tech oriented.
I'll
Um,
tell you, one of the very first bills that I'm going to sponsor when I get down there is called a regulatory sandbox. And what it is if you're a new startup business, you operate in a sandbox essentially free of any type of regulation to allow you to test out innovative technologies and do things that are, next level into the future. You have a very few customers, you impact, very little folks, but you kind of work out. And then what happens is the government kind of works alongside you and figures out what the right mechanisms are from a
mm,
regulatory standpoint. But it helps spur innovation, like a lot of what we're doing at Peachtree Corners. So yeah, I am all behind that, and I'm all behind. They've done it in a number of other states, Arizona, I think Minnesota. These regulatory sandboxes where you kind of play, you figure it out, you innovate, and
mhm.
you create new business and new opportunities. I think it's fantastic.
I love that idea. Great idea. What do you think about? I know we have Hartfield International. Take care.
That's a great question. I'm a big believer. I think Atlanta's doing a fantastic job with its current airport right now. It's the largest in the world. So
Yeah.
if it's not broke, don't fix it. Is kind of my position. Yeah, I'd love to have something right here in my backyard, but no, I think Atlanta's doing a good job right now. Yeah, I mean,
All right.
there's been some discussion over the years in terms of should the airport authority be managed by the state
Mm,
or the city. Frankly, I don't know enough about the pros and cons of each to give you an educated opinion, but I think that would be
okay.
something to look at or consider. But a second airport, in my mind at least, doesn't make sense at this point.
Oh, okay. What about movie incentives? The movie entertainment industry has been. I mean, we're the Hollywood of the East Coast, right? More productions being done in the state of Georgia than almost any other state in the Southeast. Do you think that should continue? These incentives have really helped build not just bring in these movies, but build all the peripheral infrastructure around it, caterers, all the electricians, the woodworkers, everything, um, hotels, stay, and all that. Do you think that we should continue with that type of incentive?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, just philosophically, I'm not in favor of the government kind of picking winners or losers in terms of certain businesses or industries. You're absolutely right. The film industry has been a huge boom for our state, and that's fantastic. But it really seems kind of haphazard to say let's get behind film or healthcare or insurance companies.
Hmm.
I think we, as at a government level, we ought to create a level playing field and let folks kind of compete to come here. Georgia is the number one state to do business. Really, in my mind, I don't think we need to throw stuff out there to attract folks. I will say, in terms of the film industry in particular, I do think that legislation needs to be tweaked a bit. We have a fairly large unfunded liability as a state right now of folks, these tax credits that we've offered that have been claimed, but have not been sent in to receive their money yet. And so the state has somewhere in the neighborhood of, a couple $1 billion in tax credits that haven't been claimed. And so that's a liability on our balance sheet because we haven't put a cap to it. So people can claim as many credits as they can, and that liability continues to grow. So if we were to make changes, that would be something that I'd be interested in tweaking.
Okay. I think there was one other change I'd like to see probably on that one, and that is that companies can sell their tax credits to other companies that are not shooting in the state of Georgia. I think that's ridiculous. But
and that's why I talk about the unfunded liability. We have folks who have nothing. These film companies, their tax liability is in California, so the tax credits of no value to them in Florida. So they then sell it, and we've got Georgia taxpayers who have tax credits that haven't been claimed yet. So
that's crazy. Yeah. I agree with you there. Spaceport. I know there's a thing on the coast that wants to be. I think it's in Camden County. We want to be a space state almost, I guess, in some people's minds. Do you think that maybe Elon Musk should be planning a spaceport in the state of Georgia? Do you think we should be doing something along those lines?
I think it's exciting technology. I do know the voters in Camden kind of overwhelmingly voted against it, but I'm in favor. I think Georgia lends itself just where we're located. We've got the coast there. We'd love to compete with Florida on that. So if it's not Camden, somewhere, I think Camden does lead itself naturally to be a spaceport. But again, that's for the locals to kind of figure out if that's something they want in their backyard.
All right, cool. I think we've gone through most of what I wanted to get through. Well, maybe one last thing, based on that list that I just gave you, and that's Georgia Tech. I know that Georgia Tech is doing coding camps at Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners. Love to see what would happen if Georgia Tech decides to do a satellite campus here in Peachtree Corners. I mean, I think it would be a natural extension for them. Is that I don't know if the state gets involved in that type of thing, but based on Intuitive Robotics buying 5 buildings, essentially setting up a biotech campus for robotics, for medical robotics. It doesn't make sense for us to lure the city of Peachtree Corners to lure a college, a university like Georgia Tech to build a campus here in Peachtree Corners. Any thoughts? Personally?
No, I think it's fantastic. And yeah, I'd do whatever I could to make that happen. I think just given our city's history with Paul Duke and his connection to Georgia Tech, it makes all the sense in the world, especially what we're doing with the Innovation Lab and everything here in Peachtree Corners. So yeah, the Board of Regents is really the important entity to make that happen. I've got a lot of connections there, obviously, and yeah, if that's something that both sides have an appetite for, I would be happily to help facilitate that and make it happen.
Great. Thank you, Scott. You've been very patient with me and all my questions. Before we leave, I'd like you to tell everyone, why they should vote for you, and when the date is, and ask for the vote, essentially, and where they can find out more information about Scott Hilton.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Rico, thank you again for your time today. I love Peachtree Corners. This is where we call home. I love District 48. It would be an absolute honor to serve you again. I'm the most experienced candidate in the race. The candidate has proven to be able to get stuff done, and the candidate has proven to be able to listen to both sides of the aisle, be sympathetic to everyone, listen to folks, and really be an effective leader for you in the state. I'm someone who is a common sense conservative who you can trust and really get behind to fight for you and your families. You can learn more about our campaign at scotthiltonga.com. That's scotthiltonga.com. And on there, you can click on a map to be able to scroll in to see exactly where you live in the new district. You can sign up to volunteer, contribute to the campaign, or get a yard sign. Early voting starts Monday, October 17th. I think Pinckneyville Community Center is probably the closest one to us here. That'll run for 2 weeks, Monday through Friday, and on weekends as well. I encourage you to go in, vote early, and get that done. But again, I ask for your vote, early vote, and your vote on November 8th. And again, thank you so much for your support. It would be an honor to serve Peachtree Corners in our community again. Thank you.
Scott, I appreciate your time here. Everyone, check out Scott's website and information where he stands on the issues. You can find out a little bit more about him there. Certainly, if you have questions for Scott, please direct them to Scott because he's been great about answering all sorts of questions, and he is local. So if you're not going to ask, you won't know. Um, and be diligent. Be aware of what politics you like, you don't, and where you want to vote, and don't just stick to one party because you feel that's the party that um, that you feel overall works for you. You have to really look at the issues in the local candidate running. So, Scott, thank you again. Appreciate your time. Hang in there while I say goodbye to everybody. Check out livinginpeachtreecorners.com. That's the Peachtree Corners magazine website. Our latest issue is out. We're working on next issue right now. If you have any interesting stories, feel free. Send it to editor at livinginpeachtreecorners.com. Always looking for good ideas to write about, good stories to tell. We're curating things. Check us out online on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're there. And these podcasts, of course. And thank you again to EV Remodeling Inc.